Good morning and welcome to World Talks here on TVP World. I'm Diana Skaya. On this episode of World Talks, we focus on the latest developments coming out of Serbia. But imagine this. While massive protests shake up your country for over 1 year, opposition leaders go on hunger strike, but the president of your country receives red carpet treatment in Paris. Well, that's what's happening in Belgrade. President Aleksander Vučić is shaking hands with one of the EU's top leaders while his country fights for democracy. So what's really going on here? Is this simply economic diplomacy, or does Aleksander Vučić now hold more strategic value for Europe than many expected? Well, joining me now to discuss is Rigels Halili, lecturer at the Center for European Studies, University of Warsaw. Thanks so much for being with us here on World Talks. So, Rigels,
good morning.
Do tell us just a brief overview. How do you view all this entire situation? And what is Vucic's real position in Europe today?
I would say his position is very delicate in a way that Europe, the EU, and European countries, and also neighboring countries, see that there is a taming of space and an exchange of ideas in Serbia, first of all. And second of all, they see also these massive protests that are taking place for a year now. However, the Vučić position is also conditioned by what is happening in the world, by his connections with China, with Russia, with the position of Serbia in the Balkans, in the Western Balkans especially. And therefore also this somehow influences his position and the way he's seen from outside politicians, different from the inside world, I would say, from the inside in either politicians in Serbia or people in Serbia. So that is a dual position. However, he's using it for his own purposes. He's not using it for to elaborate a bit more in terms of democracy in Serbia, or to move forward with democratization of the country, or moving for Serbia to join the EU, because the integration process has been stalled. However, he's using it for his own purpose, to show both to the outsiders that he's controlling the situation in Serbia, and to the insiders that he has support from outside. So hence again, he's controlling the situation in Serbia.
Yeah, it seems to be a little bit at odds. What we just saw on screen there was President Macron and Aleksander Vučić shaking hands. But particularly, if we notice how, if we talk about body language, you see there Aleksander Vučić really holding on, simply grasping onto, Macron's hand in such a firm handshake. So let me tell you this. They're holding talks in Paris about so-called Serbia's democratic path, economic interests, regional stability. Why is President Macron giving Vučić such a warm, almost honestly a royal welcome, if that's what we can call it, despite all these protests, hunger strikes going on at home? Is this, do you think it's about France-Serbia, business relations, trade relations? Or, like you said earlier, does Vučić genuinely hold strategic leverage here beyond the region?
I think, well, he doesn't hold any strategic leverage beyond the reason in terms of France policy, definitely. He's I would say, well, they talked for 3 hours. So they talked about geopolitics, they talked about different issues. I'm sure they talked also about the situation inside Serbia at the moment. France is perceived historically as one of the closest allies of Serbia in Western Europe, much more than Britain, Germany, let alone Germany or Austria, or Italy even. The French investments are not that high in Serbia, are not among the highest. So still, there is not this economic leverage. I think it's more of a symbolic position that France has in Serbian history in all throughout the 20th century. So Vučić probably wanted to show to the others, but above all to the public inside the country, that he has a strong connection with Macron. They spoke, as I said, for 3 hours, which was a kind of a rare thing for leaders of of two countries to speak for such a long time. And of course, he wanted very much to use this meeting for his own leverage. I'm guessing Macron would have talked something about the situation in Serbia, definitely would have raised the situation of the demonstrations. And if I read the note, and it's written over there, that they talked about democratization in Serbia. In diplomatic words, this means that there is no democratization in Serbia, and Macron raised the question of democratic rights and democratization in Serbia. So it's quite the opposite. Hence, we don't know what they have talked about. Might be also the case that Macron has discussed with Vucic the position of Vucic and Serbia versus Russia, but I don't think Macron needs Aleksander Vučić to make any deals with Vladimir Putin or Russia on a French, Russian or French and EU Russian level. That is, I think, it's out of question. Serbia does not have that kind of leverage to be that instrumental in resolving issues that are related with this topic.
Rigels, what is the opposition in Serbia saying about all this?
The opposition in Serbia is in a very delicate position at the moment. They want to change the situation in Serbia. They are calling for elections. However, they are not part of the demonstrations in the sense that the students that are organizing the demonstrations, that all of these plenums and committees that they have formed, and I just returned from Serbia yesterday, the day before yesterday, they don't want the opposition to be in and to be part of that process. Students want to keep it apolitical, apolitical as much as they want. They wanted to keep it without of the political usual process. It's more of they call it also more of an uprising from below than the political process, regular political process. And this is not going to end. There are different scenarios how this may develop in the coming months. However, leaders of the opposition, they always tend to say, and they even the day before yesterday, there were some declarations that it's naive to think that people who are not politicians will replace Vucic, so students for a chance. Therefore, it will be a time that the politicians from the opposition will come to the picture, and they will also do what politicians do usually. So they will discuss behind the cameras, and then come in front of the cameras and tell what they have achieved. So in that sense, it's a dual position that they are having. They want to have more to say within the situation, but they are not allowed, or they are restricted by the fact that the students and the protesters do not want them to be part of the protests. It's a kind of a bizarre situation, very unusual for political thinking here in EU, but in Serbian history, this is not the first time that such things have happened. So I'm looking forward for more in the future.
All right, let me shift you now a little bit to Serbia's and particularly Vucic's balancing act between Europe and Russia. Tell me, how significant are Russian economic interests in Serbia today, especially with Gazprom controlling the country's largest oil company? And I mean, Nice has secured a 3-month-long exemption from U.S. tariffs, right? So how is this, how do you view all of this?
Well, Russia is not the biggest investor in Serbia. That is something that has to be said very openly, and the media in Serbia do not say it, just because of the fact that they are controlled by the regime. The biggest investor in overall and the biggest donator in Serbia is EU. So Serbia is taking more money from EU than from Russia in terms of foreign FDIs and foreign direct investments, but also in terms of different programs that Serbia is using. So that media are not saying in Serbia. Some people do know that in Serbia, but most of the people think that Russia is the biggest ally that is helping us and so on and so forth.
But doesn't Gazprom, one second, Rigels, but doesn't Gazprom, so you're saying that Gazprom doesn't control the country's largest oil company?
No, they do not control the largest, they do not control Nice. They have a very close relationship with Nice, and is the sole supplier of Nice with crude oil. So that is Russian oil is the only one that Serbia is getting. And with sanctions from President Trump coming in, the situation in Serbia would be even much worse than the situation in Hungary, because there are no other sources of oil, and then the reserves were very low. Therefore, there was a problem of treating Serbia in a different way, and there was even a crisis at some moment 10 days ago that the prices of the oil went very much up. But for Vucic and his government, it's very clear that without the Russian oil, the country will be completely paralyzed.
Mm-hmm. And I want to ask you about this Trump Tower law. What's this all about?
Well, that also shows a duality in treating situations in Serbia by the government, by the Serbian government. There are two buildings that have the status of national monuments in Nemanja Street, just one in front of the other. The one is the building of the former Ministry of that was the Ministry of Armed Forces. And in front of it is the building, that one that you're showing, the building of the former Chief of Staff of the Serbian Army. Now, one of these buildings, this one that you're just showing now, it has to be transformed into, Jared Kushner wants to build a hotel over there. And in order to do that, they, overnight basically, the Serbian parliament accepted the law that disband the status of national monument for particularly this building only. And of course, this was a case for further protests in Serbia, and people, not only students, but also people got out. I was there in that building, in that meeting that you were showing. I was there a few days ago just to observe. I didn't participate in the protest. And that was something that shows also how people view, inhabitants of Serbia view these dual standards of the Serbian government. They know that it's about money. They know that this is about money, only money, and that it has nothing to do with Serbian interests. It has nothing to do, or probably it has to do with Serbian interests in the sense that to get some leverage within the circle of President Trump and to secure more for Serbia in that way. I would say this is something that has happened often in the Balkans, in Serbia, in the Balkans.
Right.
To me, this is nothing new. It happens all the time.
Right. Thank you so much, Rigels Halili, lecturer at Center for European Studies at the University of Warsaw. Thanks for being with us. And that completes this episode of World Talks. I'm Diana Skaya. Thanks for watching.